Hey everybody, it's Beth. Welcome to Infinite Garden. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about how my decision to let my gray hair grow in, how that's changed my relationship with style, and about how I want to present myself overall as I make my way in the world. If that sounds interesting to you, please stay tuned. If you're new here, welcome. I post videos every week about self-acceptance, authentic personal style, and sometimes the expansion of consciousness. This is a supportive and affirming community, so if that sounds good to you, I hope you subscribe and stick around. I've spent a lot of time over the last few weeks actually going through old photos of myself, trying to get a sense of how my style has changed over time and what I was focused on. I don't know if you've noticed, but life is very strange and tangled. If I look back, I can usually point to when I made a change in style direction or sort of what I was interested in, but it's kind of hard to tease out precisely why. I can break my style evolution up into three main areas. One is from basically when I was a child to when I was in my mid-20s. I feel like in many ways that's one broad style era. And then there was from when I was, 25 to basically when I decided to stop dyeing my hair. So 25 to 41, and then now into the future. The reason why I think I've been able to group these together, it has to do with, I think, when I felt most like myself and when I felt most like I needed to try to be someone else. Of course, the earliest part of my life was informed by my mother. I'm extraordinarily lucky to have had the mother that I have. She is enormously creative, beyond measure. She's a retired art teacher and is a font of creativity on all fronts, extremely talented. And when I was a little girl, my mother sewed a lot of my clothes. And this was not an attempt to conserve dollars. This wasn't like back on the prairie making dresses out of flour sacks. My mother and I were a team. By nature, I am and always have been kind of a devoted femme. I love dresses. I didn't even really want to wear pants until I was deep into elementary school. Like 5th or 6th grade is when I actually started kind of consistently wearing pants. Otherwise, it was all dresses for me all the time. My mother, being such a talented seamstress, not only made me beautiful custom dresses most of my childhood, she'd even make a corresponding dress for my Cabbage Patch doll or other dolls, so we coordinated. I want to make this clear that I loved this. I'm sure there are people out there who might remember their mother sewing for them and maybe have like comical memories about the things that they had to wear. I don't have a single one of those. The dresses my mother made for me were always marvelous, wonderful, and I wanted to be in them. To further illustrate this point, when I was in high school and it was time to shop for prom dresses, she asked me to please consider shopping for a dress. I wanted her to make my dresses so badly. She was genuinely too busy to make my prom dresses, but it's what I wanted. And the reason I wanted it is I knew that I could control the color. I was basically demanding couture services from my mother who did not have them to give. And I remember her asking me, please go shopping. And I remember at that time, the only dress I remember finding that I wanted to wear was at Saks, and it was like, it must have been Valentino. It was a beautiful red satin bell-shaped T-length dress with kind of like a geometric bodice. It was the mid-90s, so everything was very like sharp and geometric and kind of sculptural, and it was this fantastic red. And I remember saying, that's really the only dress I found that I wanted to wear. And she agreed to help me make my dresses. And I actually still have one of these dresses here. Clean lined dresses, which was the style of the time. My mom did teach me how to sew, and I do have a sewing machine downstairs. It's not something that I'm engaging in much anymore, and my skills are rusty. If I were to pick it up again, I'd have to start slow and kind of like get back into the hang of sewing, but I do know how to sew. I've been thinking a lot about how foundational the act of being able to choose every single detail about a garment because you're making it yourself. I loved the joy of seeing a concept brought into reality. This so changed my life that even still to this day, if I'm going out shopping for something, in my mind first, I completely conceive of the garment and then I go out looking for it. My mom still has to remind me that I have to buy what's in the stores, that I can't just conceive of something and then go look for it. Okay, so sewing and creating was a thing. Also, when I got to the age where I had some of my own spending money, I worked at the mall and I spent a lot of time, shopping within the mall, looking for deals. I really got great at looking at clearance racks and learning what store sale patterns were. I had a little bit of money, but not much. And so I like to stretch my dollar and look for good value. And so I learned how to be kind of a frugal shopper in these years and extended into college where I had basically no budget whatsoever. At the time of high school and into college, in the 90s, it was extremely popular to shop vintage. So from high school into middle 20s, I really relied on vintage a lot. I liked getting bold style and unique garments that were also well priced that I could afford. Vintage was like a major thing for me. I would say overall my style was ladylike. It was not necessarily trend forward, although I was very interested in style. I loved dresses and I loved putting myself together. And overall, I think I was in sort of an understated space. Of course, this was partly informed by the 90s, which had a relatively clean lined aesthetic, which appealed to me then and certainly still appeals to me now. I do think it's worth noting that this is the time of my life when my hair was just growing out of my head and I wasn't doing a whole lot to it. I would sometimes it wasn't exactly sun-in, but something like that to lighten my hair a little bit in the summertime. But I had dark ash brown hair and I wore it curly 100% of the time. I remember at this time that I always felt very comfortable in what I put together. I didn't feel overly awkward. At this time, I didn't think actively about my personal style. I was just choosing what I liked and putting together looks that I liked. My style was always overtly feminine, pretty ladylike, and relatively classic. So the next era, I would say, is from around my mid-20s, I'll say 25, to we'll just say 41. So in this era, I would say that the most important factor governing my personal style was my career. During this time, I was working in the investment real estate space. During this time, I worked for a couple of different firms, but always in the kind of high-end investment real estate space, mostly in the high-end office space, but also later luxury retail. I worked in a couple of different corporate environments, but I would say overall, the dress codes were primarily business formal, and the environments where I worked were dominantly male environments. So for men, this was pretty cut and dry. Gray and navy blue suits, 5 days a week, white shirts preferred. For women, it was a little more unclear. During this period of time, I think workwear for women was really going through an awkward phase. Pantsuits were a thing. I had more pantsuits than I'm going to talk about on this particular day. This time of my life was kind of tricky because my budget for work needed to be pretty generous to be able to afford clothes that looked like the quality of clothes that the men in my offices were wearing. Most of the men I worked with were more advanced in their careers and had been making very good money for a long time, and they wore beautiful suits. My favorite boss during this time in particular was so tall and so thin that he had to have his suits and shirts made for him. He had to have everything tailored because he was so tall. I think he was 6'5" and he had like a 13-inch neck, very slim. Anyway, great guy. He had every one of his suits handmade for him. And although I wasn't expected to have somebody custom making my clothes for me during this period of my life, I did feel like my clothes needed to at least look like they belonged in the same room at the same table as my boss's clothes. During this time, I learned to spend more money on clothes and I learned to stop looking at the clearance rack. My work wardrobe required a generous budget, which didn't leave much left over for my weekend clothes. I remember always feeling like I was killing it in my pantsuits and my good heels 5 days a week, and then the weekends were just pure mismatched threadbare chaos. But this is where I learned to look at the clothes that were available that I wanted and that looked right on me and that I could wear for a long time. This is really where I learned to invest in quality. I was a huge J. Crew shopper at this time. This was during the Jenna Lyons era of J. Crew. I just want to state for the record that if it hadn't been for Jenna Lyons's direction of J. Crew, I honestly don't know how I would have dressed myself during a huge chunk of this period of time. J. Crew at this time was like kind of like a mini Ralph Lauren, I guess. It was J. Crew offered classic American clothes that had been updated in a way that felt fresh and new and were entirely appropriate for the work setting where I was, that did require classic conservative business formal, I remember showing up to a meeting one time with my boss wearing an identical outfit. We were both wearing like the navy blue schoolboy blazer with the brass buttons and a pair of khaki pants. I had the J. Crew girl version of that outfit, but it was pretty funny. Like I was literally dressing like the boys so I could fit in and be comfortable. Now I found a way during this time to make this work for me. I didn't mind that style of dress. Like I said, I've always had kind of a ladylike bent, but I never felt comfortable being at all expressive, soft, or feminine. I felt like that was a liability for me in this particular environment. This environment was very male driven and pretty aggressive, to be honest. So I like to keep a really clean lined look, no nonsense, never sexy, really buttoned down. That was sort of my move for a long time. This style era of my life had everything to do with the fact that I worked 5 days a week in an office in a very formal environment that really required me to conform, and conform I did. So not so coincidentally at this time, this is when I began dyeing my hair to cover my gray growth. So at this time, I'm working in an environment where I do feel like a square peg in a round hole. I simply don't fit in, ever. I'm usually the only woman in the room, and a lot of my interests and my tastes were not shared by anybody I was with. I could rarely participate in conversations, certainly not about sports. And the things that I was interested in, there was like often a general disdain for, so I didn't even enjoy talking about my interests if people asked me what I did, last weekend, if I'd gone to an art exhibit or seen a play or something like that. I often didn't feel comfortable sharing it because I knew it would be met with kind of like a frat boy sort of response, and it wasn't comfortable or fun for me. So I spent a lot of that time both, dressing as they dressed so I could fit in, and minimizing my interests during this time so that I could, minimizing my expression of my interests. I still engaged in my interest. It didn't stop me from going to the plays or, reading the books that I was reading. It just stopped me from having that be part of my outward expression in the world. I kept that private. During this period of time, I can say definitively that I was hiding. I would say at this time, my sense of self-expression went a bit into like a dormant period. And instead of exploring who I was, I think I spent more time exploring who I could pass myself off as. Can I pass myself off as a redhead? This was a period of time where I spent more time exploring what I could become rather than who I was. That period of my life from 25 to 41, although I can say that I was thinking about what I could become, I learned a lot during this time. I learned to invest in high quality garments that last a long time. I learned the value of that. I learned that overall cost for a garment isn't just at the point of sale, it's over the lifetime of that garment. I absolutely learned how to shop for quality during this time. I also at this time did indulge in some luxury purchases. During this span of my career, at one point I was managing a luxury shopping center, and I did feel pressure to present in a way that was consistent with that particular role. So I did also get into some very high ticket luxury, visibly luxurious items during this time, and I don't regret it at all. All of those items that I purchased that maybe would have raised eyebrows for their price tag, every one of those items remains in my closet, and I'm grateful to have every one of them. So it was also during this time period that I learned the value of super high quality clothing and investing in my clothing. This brings me to now. I don't know when this particular era will end, but I know that it arose in March 2020 when the whole world changed. As I said previously, most of my clothes and my shopping habits were all related to how I needed to dress to go to work. And once the work from home era began, at that time I was 41, it was simultaneously when I stopped dyeing my hair. So these two things have really gone together. During this time, like a lot of people, I went through my closet. And I went through every item piece by piece, and I was looking for what really made sense to keep. I noted at this time that I would say the major foundational base of my wardrobe at this point had exceeded the 5-year mark. I had invested well in high quality clothes, and I had worn them, and they really did look worn. So during the last couple of years now, I have thinned out my wardrobe considerably. I'm also now currently practicing a no-buy. My no-buy began officially February 1, but I really stopped shopping for anything new mid-January 2022, and I have an embargo on buying anything new until the end of July. And this is very interesting because right now the impulse to shop for clothes and for shoes is super, super high. It's spring, there's a new season, there's a lot of new interesting clothes on the market, and there's a lot that has caught my attention. But I'm using this time right now as sort of a cleanse. I'm really inspecting what's in my closet and I'm noting what I reach for. What is left in my closet is good stuff. Everything is in good condition. It's high quality stuff I want to keep. I know that. And so now I'm noting of these garments, what do I actually want to wear? How do the clothes in my closet align with how I want to present myself to the world? I've been noticing a lot of what's in my wardrobe appears really quite heavy and in some cases kind of like dull. I wear a lot of black, and when I sat down to film this video, I had a black sweater on and I looked at myself in the camera and I thought, this isn't it. This isn't what you want to look like. And I went back and found this shirt dress that I have from Zara. So that's what I'm keeping track of right now. There was part of me that wanted to come to this video and say, I have all these conclusions. I've been thinking about this and I've drawn these conclusions. And I have to tell you that that's not the case. What I recognized is that I'm in the early days of a new era of my style evolution. And in looking back through my history, here's what I know. I know that I want to reopen the possibility of shopping for vintage. Second, I know for sure that I'm going to continue shopping for high quality pieces. Fewer items, higher quality. I've been on that horse for a really long time, simply out of necessity. I wanted to say that I don't really get into fast fashion, but I'm literally sitting here in a Zara dress today. I do love a shirtwaist dress. Finally, and this is maybe a famous last words thing, but I'm very interested in attempting to sew again. My skills are rusty, and so I would have to start with something very simple, like maybe a robe or a nightgown, something like that, just to dip my feet back into the waters. When I look back at the creative control that we had, because my mother had this particular skill, she was able to do just about anything with a sewing machine. That level of skill led to control over creative expression. And I remember how much fun that was to plan projects and to carry them out and to wear something that I felt fantastic in that nobody else had, that was 100% our vision. I loved that so much, and there's a huge part of me that wants to reconnect with that. I'm a little nervous about where I'll find time for that, but I do hope before this year is out I can at least crack open my machine and just dip back into this particular skill. Although I'm in the early days of this new kind of style era, there are some things that I've noticed that I wanted to share that feel different to me. One of the key things that feels different is that I'm more comfortable with being seen now. My silver hair can sometimes draw more attention to me than I was previously used to getting. And so in a lot of ways, I've gotten more comfortable with being seen. I think before I used to try to blend in more, and I was successful in doing that. Choosing to grow out your gray hair can draw quite a lot of attention to you. If you're in the early days of this, maybe you've experienced a little bit of that, but it's been really real for me. It draws quite a lot of attention. So in this new era, I'm more aware of the fact that I'm being seen and that I will be seen. So I'm starting to put myself together with that in mind more. I'm much more interested in wearing colors, whereas before I've always been drawn to blacks and navies and kind of other colors that are understated and blend in. I'm becoming more interested in wearing vibrant colors. This is something I used to relish when I was younger, was wearing very femme kind of colorful dresses. I'm feeling like that again. That's something that I want. And so as I start shopping, once my no-buy is over, I'm going to be looking for more colorful garments. I'm going to be looking for more statement pieces. So as I exit my no-buy in a couple of months here at the end of July, and I start shopping for pieces, I hope you'll want to join me with that, because I'd love to bring you along for that. This is a work in progress, of course. I would love to hear from you. Do you feel like you went through a similar evolution kind of connected to the events of the last couple of years? Do you feel like, for those of you who are growing out your silver hair, do you feel like that's changing your sense of style? I know for me personally, I'm interested in appearing a little more like sharply put together than I have been in the last few years. And if you're still here, thank you so much for watching my video all the way to the end. I just love this community and all of you. Anyway, I hope this video was interesting to you, and I hope all of you have a fantastic week ahead. Thank you so much for watching. Talk soon.